go away.
I'm so glad that the rest of you can't hear a fraction of the table talk that the cantor and I engage in during the service.
There are 2 microphones right now.
I know, but I sense that you, maybe at home they can get, I don't know, Marty, can they hear us at home when we whisper to each other? Yeah, every word of it, huh? Well, good Yontif. Just this past week, I've had one of those conversations that leave you scratching your head at best. And every word of this is absolutely true. I was sitting with an individual who was trying to convince me that the research that he had done was better than anything the rest of the scientific world had done, and that he, not a scientist, knew the truth about the COVID virus. He enthusiastically began to tell me about how Big Pharma was pulling a fantastic scheme over on us. His claim was that there existed absolutely no proof of any virus called COVID-19. It was there that I paused him and said, I really don't think that I want this conversation to continue. He said, but this is really important. And so I said, you've got 3 minutes. And that was about all I was going to spend on it. He continued, and when I asked, how was it possible that 6 million people had already died from it, he said, really? How do we know that those pictures weren't staged? By that time, we had already surpassed the 3 minutes I'd set, and I told him that I needed to stop this discussion because what he was saying was making me angry. That I had lost too many friends and had comforted too many people who lost loved ones to be able to tolerate this kind of discussion. A few months ago, I referenced a story that was on CNN about a recent poll. It seems that an astonishing 1 in 6 Americans is not entirely sure that the earth is round. I wanted to cry when I heard that. It also seems that the concept of the post-truth era is a real thing. So much so that it was admitted as a term to the dictionary in 2016. Post-truth? The prefix, post, means something that comes after. Does that mean we're living in the time after truth? Apparently we are, but it's also not a new phenomenon. You want to guess who wrote these words? There has been more new error propagated by the press in the last 10 years than in 100 years before. That's right. It was our president, John Adams, in about the year 1800. There's no question that the speed and proliferation of information has sped up, and with it, misinformation in the digital age, but it's nothing new. But in this time of truth decay, see what I did there? We're mourning the loss of something that felt reliable. As Tony Ragon writes, when Edward R. Murrow described the Blitz devastating London, shocked listeners didn't question what they were hearing. When Walter Cronkite teared up and told America that John F. Kennedy had been shot and killed in Dallas, the public never wondered whether it had truly happened. When Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, under the trusted banner of the Washington Post, broke the Watergate scandal and eventually connected it and the subsequent cover-up to Richard Nixon, the country reluctantly accepted that its president was, in fact, a crook. And it was easier when we all listened to one news source and trusted that what they shared was the truth. The now famous sociologist Yuval Noah Harari has suggested that the reason that we're experiencing this post-truth era is because we are a post-truth species. We have thrived as Homo sapiens thanks to our ability to weave tales that are accepted as truth among a large number of people. For example, we know that $1 is only a flimsy piece of paper, but we all choose to believe the story that it's worth more than the paper it's printed on. Similarly, we know that a corporation is nothing more than a figment. Wow, that is a hell of a wasp. We're going to just keep him going. Where was I? We were talking about dollars, and now we're moving on to corporations. Did he come over and say hi? Maybe I should have killed him, huh? Thank you, Julie. She's just going to walk him outside. Take 3. Dollars, corporations, you with me? Corporations are nothing more than a figment of our collective imagination, written up in documents that almost none of us could understand. And yet we seek to hold the corporation and not the people running it accountable for the behavior. How can something imaginary act well or badly? Harari says, as long as everybody believes in the same fictions, we all obey the same laws and can therefore cooperate effectively. When 1,000 people believe something made up, some made-up story for 1 month, that's fake news. When 1 billion people believe it for 1,000 years, that's a religion. He doesn't suggest that religion is bad, simply that we must understand the nature of its teachings. This probably sounds right to you. One religion argues that there's one God, and another stakes its claim on the truth of multiple gods. One religion claims that Muhammad is God's final prophet, and another says that it's the Israelite, Malachi. Either Jesus is the Messiah, or it's Shabtai Tzvi, or Jacob Frank, or Bar Kokhba, or none of them. Every one of these beliefs emerged one day, and as it gained traction in their communities of believers, they were shouted down as fake news by others. We know that everybody manipulates the truth. In fact, we almost have to. Rabbi Jeffrey Rubenstein comments on an experiment by A.J. Jacobs in Esquire magazine entitled, "I Think You're Fat." He tries to live for 30 days, speaking only the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. At the end of the month, he's grateful to be able to return to the white lies, the half-truths, and the other deceptions that most of us practice on a daily basis. He concludes that had he been 100% of the time honest, rather than the 90% he actually achieved, he would have, quote, gotten beaten up, fired, and divorced. Judaism even requires the telling of white lies in certain situations when another's shame can be avoided and their honor preserved. But I bet our classical rabbinic voices could never have imagined the world today in which we actually have to devote our attention and energy to refuting the claims made by some about Jewish space lasers. And then we have to listen to the defense when challenged about accuracy of using alternative facts. This is dangerous. And the Chancellor Emeritus of the Jewish Theological Seminary, Arnold Eisen, said a couple of years ago to a class of graduates, if perpetrators of evil can get away with their deeds, see them laundered in the wash of forgetfulness or error, then goodness itself seems threatened, and with it, the meaning of our lives. We cannot draw lessons from history if the facts of what happened are not known. We know how easily the truth can be manipulated to their own advantage by those with power. The facts must be heard loud and clear. How does it work, and why does it work? Francis Bacon was already writing about this in the year 1620, noting that it is human nature to seize eagerly on any fact, however slender, that supports his theory, but will question or conveniently ignore the far stronger facts that overthrow it. Today, you might know this as confirmation bias, the preference to find truth in the things we already believe or in the words of people we want to believe. And it's been used plenty of times since then. Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda maestro, showed the world his hand when he said, "A lie told once remains a lie, but a lie told 1,000 times becomes the truth." Goebbels also believed that it is the absolute right of the state to supervise the formation of public opinion. Harari once again cautions us that truth and power can travel together only so far. Sooner or later, they go their separate ways. If you want power, he said, at some point, you'll have to spread fictions. And if you want to know the truth about the world, at some point, you will have to renounce power. Scholars throughout history faced this dilemma. Do they serve power or truth? This might be our most significant insight and our most valuable warning. The people in power are the ones who have most often used misinformation as an effective way to preserve that position. Hannah Arendt was right. It can seem that truth and politics are always at war with one another. Political, religious, and social leaders far too often violate our trust toward the end of holding on to their positions of power. On Yom Kippur, a day in which we fearlessly look into our own truth, look deeply into the mirror, we should also be renewing our commitment to examining all the truths that are shown to us by others. Our awareness and acknowledgement of the pattern does then demand more of us than we've been giving. It means that when we hear a story on the news or read something amazing on Facebook, it's incumbent on us to be more discerning. Remember, just because it's on the internet doesn't make it true. To ask ourselves, what is the source? And does that source perhaps have an agenda that will challenge the truth? Oscar Wilde wrote, "The truth is rarely pure and never simple." Is it possible that others' contribution to the topic at hand may hold some inconvenient truths that we would do well to hear? Particularly as a people who've been at the mercy of the lies told by totalitarian rulers for centuries, our Jewish community ought to be vigilant about this. Historian Michael Henke wrote, "Oh, take it." Historian Michael Henke wrote, "A future based on the clay feet of half-truths cannot prevail, as history has shown us repeatedly since ancient times. From Bolsonaro in Brazil, to Kim in North Korea, to Putin in Russia, tyrants will promote whatever facts and ideologies it takes to preserve their own power. And we see the dire consequences on the most vulnerable. This marvelous country of ours is too precious in its role on the world stage to allow it to crumble from within. erosion of trust, and our inability to engage with one another are frightening precursors to a future that I prefer not to imagine. In this coming year, I ask you to renew your commitment to examining the sources of your information. Ask yourself repeatedly, who stands to gain from my trust? Can this really be true? And remember that there are others who are looking to gain influence and a strengthened position by your gift of support. Are you supporting the right people? And it's said that George Orwell once wrote, "In times of universal deceit, telling the truth will be a revolutionary act." Be a revolutionary. Be a revolutionary. Good Yom Tif.